The scorching Texas sun hung low over the rugged horizon as Victoria Fairfield staggered down the dusty main street of Terlingua. Her once pristine blue dress now hanging in tatters around her ankles, streaked with mud and torn at the shoulder. Blood trickled from a small cut above her brow, mingling with the tears that carved clean paths down her dirt-smudged cheeks. The townsfolk stared but kept their distant. Strangers in this remote corner of the West were viewed with equal parts curiosity and suspicion. Victoria had never imagined her journey west would end like this. Robbed, abandoned, and utterly alone in a town she'd never heard of, until the stagecoach driver had announced their stop yesterday morning. That seemed a lifetime ago now, before the bandits, before the escape through the arroyo during the sudden downpour, before everything she owned was stolen or destroyed. The general store's porch came into view, and Victoria stumbled toward it, desperate for shade and rest. Her legs gave way just as she reached the steps, and she collapsed onto the rough-hewn boards, the last of her strength deserting her. Miss, are you all right?" The deep voice cut through her haze of exhaustion. Victoria lifted her head to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. As he stepped closer, his features came into focus, a strong, square jaw peppered with stubble, concerned green eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson, and shoulders broad enough to suggest years of hard physical labor. Victoria attempted to stand, only for dizziness to overwhelm her. "I need help." The man knelt beside her, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair that curled slightly at the temples. "Name's Garrett Mitchell. I've got a wagon just down the way. Can you walk if I help you, or should I carry you?" Victoria tried once more to rise, clutching at the porch railing. "I can walk, Mr. Mitchell. I just need—" Her knees buckled again. Without hesitation, Garrett swept her into his arms. "Folks around here just call me Garrett," he said, his voice gentler than his rugged appearance suggested. "Let's get you somewhere you can rest." Victoria should have protested. Propriety demanded it, but exhaustion and the strange comfort of this stranger's arms silenced her objections. She felt herself being carefully placed in a wagon, a canteen pressed to her lips. "Small sips," Garrett advised. "You look half dead from thirst." The water revived her enough to take stock of her surroundings. Garrett Mitchell appeared to be in his early 30s, his sun-weathered face suggesting a life spent outdoors. His clothes were worn but clean denims, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A gun belt sat low on his hips, the holster worn in a way that told Victoria he knew how to use the weapon it carried. "Thank you," she managed after drinking. "I don't know what I would have done if—" "No need for thanks yet," Garrett interrupted, climbing onto the wagon seat. "My ranch is about 3 miles outside town. I've got a housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez. She'll help get you cleaned up and fed." Victoria pulled her tattered dress tighter around her shoulders, suddenly conscious of how she must appear. "I shouldn't impose. If you could just help me find the sheriff." Garrett's expression darkened. "Sheriff Tinsley won't be much help to you right now. He's 3 days into a whiskey bender since his wife left him. Besides, you need tending to before anything else." As the wagon lurched forward, Victoria watched the small cluster of buildings that comprised Terlingua recede. She should have been frightened, heading into the unknown with a man she'd just met, but something about Garrett Mitchell's steady gaze and careful handling of her wounded state told her she was safer with him than anywhere in town. "You got a name?" he asked as they followed a narrow trail through scrubland dotted with cacti and mesquite. Victoria Fairfield." She hesitated before adding, "I was traveling to El Paso to take a teaching position." Garrett nodded, keeping his eyes on the trail. "Long way from where exactly?" "Boston," Victoria answered, noting how his eyebrows rose slightly. My father passed last winter. There was nothing left for me there. And now, Victoria looked down at her ruined dress, her empty hands. Now I have nothing at all. Not nothing, Garrett corrected. You've got your life, and right now, that's what matters most. The sun had fully set by the time they reached the ranch. It wasn't grand by any means, a modest one-story house with a broad porch, a large barn, and several smaller outbuildings, but it was well maintained, with a corral where several horses dozed in the gathering darkness. A plump woman with silver-streaked black hair hurried from the house as they approached, her face lined with concern as Garrett helped Victoria down from the wagon. Madre de Dios, what happened? The woman rushed forward, taking Victoria's arm to steady her. Found her collapsed in town, Mrs. Rodriguez, Garrett explained. She's been robbed and needs looking after. Of course. Come, Majida. Mrs. Rodriguez's firm but gentle grip guided Victoria toward the house. We will get you cleaned up and fed. The interior was simple but comfortable, polished wooden floors, sturdy furniture, and kerosene lamps that cast a warm glow over everything. Mrs. Rodriguez led Victoria to a small bedroom at the back of the house, immediately bustling about to prepare a bath. Mr. Mitchell has running water, she explained proudly as she pumped water into a copper tub. One of the first in the county to have such a thing. He is always thinking of improvements. Victoria sank gratefully onto the edge of the bed, fatigue making her limbs heavy. He's very kind to help a stranger. Mrs. Rodriguez's dark eyes softened. That is his way. Now let me see about finding you something to wear while I wash your dress. She disappeared, returning moments later with a man's shirt, clean but patched at the elbows. This is Mr. Mitchell's. He said to give you his cleanest shirt until we can find something better. Victoria accepted the garment, running her fingers over the worn cotton. Please thank him for me. Left alone to bathe, Victoria slowly peeled off her ruined dress, wincing at the scratches and bruises that mapped her desperate escape from the bandits. The warm water stung at first but soon soothed her battered body. She washed away the dirt and tears, allowing herself a moment to fully comprehend how close she had come to a far worse fate. Afterward, she slipped into Garrett's shirt, the fabric enveloping her like a dress, the sleeves rolled up several times to free her hands. The garment smelled of soap and something uniquely masculine, not unpleasant, but distinctly him. Mrs. Rodriguez returned with a simple meal of beans, tortillas, and tender beef that made Victoria realize how desperately hungry she was. She ate quickly, embarrassed by her appetite but unable to stop until her plate was clean. Mr. Mitchell wishes to speak with you if you are feeling better, Mrs. Rodriguez said as she cleared the dishes. Victoria nodded, suddenly nervous about facing her rescuer while dressed in his clothing. She followed Mrs. Rodriguez to a small study where Garrett stood looking out a window, his hat now absent, his profile etched in the lamplight. Miss Fairfield, he said, turning as she entered. His eyes flickered over her appearance in his shirt, but his expression remained respectful. You're looking more yourself. Thanks to your kindness, Victoria replied. I don't know how to repay you. Garrett gestured to a chair. No need for repayment. Anyone would have done the same. Victoria sat, smoothing the shirt over her knees. I don't think that's true, Mr. Mitchell. Not everyone would take in a stranger. Garrett, he corrected again, and maybe you're right. He settled into the chair opposite her. Can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you? Victoria recounted the events, the stagecoach ambush a few miles outside Terlingua, how she'd managed to slip away during the chaos and hide in a ravine, the sudden rain that had turned her hiding place into a dangerous torrent, forcing her to flee through muddy terrain that tore at her dress and skin. 3 men, she concluded. I didn't see their faces clearly. They wore bandanas. Garrett's jaw tightened. Sounds like the Calloway brothers and their new partner. They've been terrorizing stage coaches between here and Fort Davis for months now. The sheriff, as I said, Sheriff Tinsley isn't much good to anyone these days. Garrett leaned forward. Miss Fairfield, Victoria, you're welcome to stay here until you decide what to do next. The room you're in isn't used, and Mrs. Rodriguez would appreciate the company. Victoria hesitated. That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. Perhaps there's work in town I could find, a place to board. Terlingua's a mining town, Garrett explained. Not much call for a school teacher and the boarding options for a single woman. He trailed off, his implication clear. I see. Victoria's shoulders slumped. Her carefully laid plans had crumbled in a matter of hours. Think on it overnight, Garrett suggested, rising. You've had a difficult day. Things might look different in the morning. That night, lying in a strange bed in a strange house, wearing a strange man's shirt, Victoria stared at the ceiling and considered her options. She had no money, no possessions beyond the clothes she'd arrived in, which were ruined, and no prospects. The teaching position in El Paso would likely be given to someone else when she failed to arrive on time. She could write to the school board, explaining her situation, but with no way to pay for her passage there. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of masked bandits and rushing water. When Victoria finally woke, sunlight was streaming through the window, and the sounds of a working ranch drifted through the open window, horses nickering, men calling to one another, the clang of metal on metal from what sounded like a smithy. Mrs. Rodriguez had left a simple dress on the chair beside the bed, faded blue calico, clearly well worn but clean and carefully mended. Victoria dressed gratefully, though she kept Garrett's shirt folded neatly on the bed, a tangible reminder of his kindness. In the kitchen, she found Mrs. Rodriguez preparing breakfast, the older woman's capable hands moving with practiced efficiency. Ah, you are awake. Good morning, Miss Fairfield. The dress, it fits well enough, Victoria smiled. Yes, thank you. Is it yours? It belonged to my daughter before she married and moved to San Antonio. Mrs. Rodriguez placed a plate of eggs and bacon before Victoria. Eat, eat. You are too thin. Victoria obeyed, her appetite returned after a night's rest. Where is Mr. Mitchell this morning? He is checking the north pasture. One of the hands reported seeing strangers there yesterday. Mrs. Rodriguez's expression grew serious. Bad men sometimes use the ranch borders for their comings and goings. Mr. Mitchell does not allow such things. Victoria thought of the gun belt Garrett wore so comfortably. Has he been in Terlingua long? 10 years now. He came from Austin after the war, bought this land when no one thought it worth anything. Pride colored the housekeeper's voice. Now he has one of the most successful cattle operations in the county, though it is not so big as some. He seems very. Victoria searched for the right word. Capable. Mrs. Rodriguez's smile was knowing. He is that, and a good man, though not always easy. Life has made him careful with his trust. Before Victoria could inquire further, the back door opened and Garrett entered, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. He nodded to Victoria, his expression warming slightly. Morning. Sleep well. Yes, thank you. Victoria gestured to her borrowed dress. And thank you for all of this. Garrett shrugged, accepting a cup of coffee from Mrs. Rodriguez. Glad to see you looking better. He seemed about to say more when a young ranch hand appeared at the door. Boss, Emilio found tracks heading toward the canyon. Looks like 3 riders came through last night. Garrett's expression hardened. Saddle my horse, Pedro. I'll be right out. As the young man hurried away, Garrett turned back to Victoria. "I need to check this out. Make yourself at home. I'll be back by supper." After he left, Victoria helped Mrs. Rodriguez with household chores, grateful for the distraction. The housekeeper taught her to make tortillas, laughing good-naturedly at Victoria's first clumsy attempts. They washed linens together, hanging them to dry in the hot Texas sun, and Victoria found herself enjoying the simple, productive tasks. "You are good with your hands," Mrs. Rodriguez observed as Victoria expertly folded dried sheets. "Not like some city girls who come west." "My father was a professor, but my mother believed in practical education," Victoria explained. "She taught me to cook and sew alongside my lessons in literature and mathematics. A wise woman, your mother, she was." Victoria smoothed a pillowcase, remembering. "She died when I was 16. Consumption." Mrs. Rodriguez crossed herself. "Lo siento, it is hard to lose parents." As the day progressed, Victoria found herself watching the horizon, waiting for Garrett's return. She told herself it was merely concern for her host's safety, but even she couldn't quite believe the lie. There was something about the taciturn rancher that had caught her interest, his quiet confidence, the kindness that seemed to surprise even him, the hints of a past that had shaped him into the man he was now. Dusk was settling over the ranch when Garrett finally returned, his expression grim as he dismounted in the yard. Victoria, who had been sitting on the porch reading one of the few books she'd found in the house, rose as he approached. "You found something," she said, not a question. Garrett nodded, climbing the steps to stand beside her. "The Callaways made camp in the canyon. They're gone now, but they left enough behind to confirm it was them." He studied her face. "Did they take anything from you that might be distinctive?" Victoria thought for a moment. "My father's pocket watch, silver with his initials engraved on the back, JTF, Joseph Thomas Fairfield." Her throat tightened. "It was all I had left of him." Garrett's eyes softened with understanding. "I found a watch matching that description in their campsite. They must have dropped it in their hurry to leave." Hope surged through Victoria. "You have it." He reached into his vest pocket and produced the watch, its silver casing dull with dust but unmistakably her father's. Victoria took it with trembling hands, tears blurring her vision as she traced the familiar initials. "Thank you," she whispered. "You don't know what this means to me." For the first time since she'd met him, Garrett smiled, fully a transformation that made him suddenly, startlingly handsome. "I think I might." That evening they sat longer at the dinner table, conversation flowing more easily between them. Garrett spoke of his time in the Confederate cavalry during the war, his voice matter of fact as he recounted both the horrors and the rare moments of humanity he'd witnessed. Victoria told him about her father's academic life, the small apartment above the university library where she'd grown up surrounded by books and ideas. "You must find Terlingua quite a change from Boston," Garrett observed as Mrs. Rodriguez served coffee. Victoria considered this. "It is different, certainly. But there's a rawness here that has its own appeal. Boston sometimes felt like living inside a very ornate, very confining box. And now, what will you do?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to address. Victoria cradled her coffee cup. "I should write to the school board in El Paso, explain my situation. Perhaps the position is still available." She hesitated. "But I have no means to get there, even if it is." "The stage comes through again next week," Garrett said, his tone carefully neutral. "I could arrange passage for you if that's what you want." Was it what she wanted? Victoria wasn't sure anymore. Just days ago, her course had seemed so clear: travel west, take the teaching position, build a new life far from the painful memories Boston held. Now, sitting across from this complicated, compelling man in his modest ranch house, she felt possibilities shifting, realigning. "I don't know," she admitted honestly. "I need time to think." Garrett nodded, rising from the table. "Take all the time you need. There's no rush." Days passed, falling into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Victoria continued helping Mrs. Rodriguez with household duties, but she also began venturing beyond the house, exploring the ranch under the housekeeper's watchful eye. She learned the names of the ranch hands Pedro, Emilio, Samuel, and half a dozen others who tipped their hats respectfully whenever she passed. Garrett remained somewhat elusive, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark, consumed with the running of his ranch. But each evening they would share dinner, their conversations growing longer, more personal. Victoria found herself watching the subtle changes in his expression, the way his hands moved when he spoke of things that mattered to him, the rare moments when he laughed. On her 5th day at the ranch, Victoria was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats approaching fast. She turned to see Garrett riding hard toward the house, another rider close behind him. As they drew nearer, she recognized Sheriff Tinsley, looking considerably more sober than Garrett had described him. The men dismounted and Garrett strode toward her, his expression urgent. "Victoria, I need you to come with us to town. The sheriff's caught one of the men who robbed you." Victoria's heart raced. "You want me to identify him?" Sheriff Tinsley, a tall man with a drooping mustache and tired eyes, stepped forward. "That's right, madam. Got him trying to pawn some jewelry in Brewster that matches descriptions from several stagecoach robberies. Need you to confirm he's one of the men who attacked your coach." Victoria glanced down at her borrowed dress, suddenly conscious of her appearance. "Of course. Just let me change, no time," Garrett interrupted. "He's being held temporarily, but his partners are still out there. If they get wind of his capture." Understanding the urgency, Victoria nodded. "Let me get my shawl." Minutes later, she was seated beside Garrett in his wagon, the sheriff following on horseback. The journey to town passed in tense silence, Victoria mentally preparing herself to face one of the men who had caused her such terror and loss. Terlingua looked different in daylight, less menacing but more dilapidated than she'd first perceived. The jail was a small adobe building next to the sheriff's office, its single cell visible through a barred window. Inside, a narrow-faced man with several days' growth of beard sat on a cot, his expression sullen. "That's Cal Calloway," Sheriff Tinsley explained as they entered. "Youngest of the brothers. Take a good look, madam. Was he one of them?" Victoria approached the cell cautiously, studying the prisoner. The memory of that terrifying day flashed before her, masked men shouting, gunfire, the stagecoach driver slumping forward with a bullet in his shoulder. She'd seen little of their faces, but as Cal Calloway glared at her, a detail surfaced. "His eyes," she said quietly. "I remember his eyes and his voice when she stopped, unwilling to repeat the threats he'd made. "Yes, he was there," Cal spat on the floor. "You're lying. I ain't never seen this lady before in my life." Garrett stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to Victoria's elbow to steady her. "We found her father's watch at your campsite, Calloway. Want to explain that?" "Found it," Cal muttered. "Alongside the trail. Finders keepers." Sheriff Tinsley shook his head. "That won't wash, Cal. We've got witnesses placing you and your brothers near 3 different robbery sites. This is just the final nail in your coffin." As they left the jail, Victoria felt a strange mix of relief and unease. One man caught, but 2 still free, and now they would know someone had identified their partner. "What happens now?" she asked as Garrett helped her back into the wagon. "Tinsley will transfer him to the county seat for trial," Garrett explained. Meanwhile, he's sending telegrams to surrounding towns to be on the lookout for the other Calloways. Victoria nodded, glancing back at the jail. Will they come for him? His brothers? Garrett's expression was grim. They might. Family loyalty runs strong in men like that, even if it's twisted by their criminal ways. Then the ranch might be in danger. I've thought of that, Garrett admitted. I'm posting extra guards tonight just in case, but don't worry, Victoria, you're safe with me. The way he said it not as a boast, but as a simple statement of fact made her believe him completely. In the short time she'd known him, Garrett Mitchell had proven himself to be a man of his word, someone who understood responsibility and honor in a way many merely claimed to. That night, Victoria lay awake longer than usual, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of men moving around the property, taking up guard positions. Eventually, she rose and moved to the window, peering out into the moonlit yard. Garrett stood on the porch below, rifle in hand, his posture alert as he scanned the surrounding darkness. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes meeting across the distance. Victoria raised her hand in a small gesture that was part gratitude, part something else she wasn't ready to name. Garrett nodded once, his expression softening before he returned to his vigil. Morning arrived without incident, though the tension remained. Garrett doubled the men working near the house and insisted Victoria stay close to the buildings. She spent the day helping Mrs. Rodriguez prepare extra food for the men standing guard, her thoughts continuously returning to Garrett, his protective instincts, his quiet determination, the way he had looked at her in the moonlight. It was late afternoon when the attack came not from the Calloway brothers seeking revenge, but from a different threat entirely. Victoria was in the garden behind the house, gathering vegetables for dinner, when she heard Mrs. Rodriguez scream from the kitchen. Dropping her basket, Victoria ran toward the sound, only to freeze at the sight that greeted her. Two men strangers with hard eyes and guns drawn had forced their way into the kitchen. One held Mrs. Rodriguez by the arm, his gun pressed to her side. The other was rifling through drawers, pocketing anything that looked valuable. "Where's Mitchell keep his money?" the first man demanded, shaking Mrs. Rodriguez roughly. "I do not know, please, there is nothing, liar." He raised his hand to strike her. "Stop." Victoria stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Leave her alone." Both men turned, the second whistling lowly. "Well, what have we here? Mitchell's got himself a pretty little thing stashed away." "Let her go," Victoria insisted, trying to keep her fear from showing. "Mr. Mitchell will be back any moment with his men." The first man laughed. "Nice try, sweetheart. We watched them ride out to the north pasture not 20 minutes ago. It's just us and you ladies for the next couple hours." Victoria's mind raced. Garrett and most of the men were gone, focused on the threat from the Calloways. These opportunists had seized their chance. "Take whatever you want and leave," she said, edging closer to Mrs. Rodriguez. "No one needs to get hurt." "Oh, we'll take what we want," the second man agreed, his gaze traveling over Victoria in a way that made her skin crawl. "Starting with Mitchell's strongbox. Where is it?" Victoria had no idea, but she needed to buy time. "In the study. I'll show you, Mrs. Rodriguez shot her a warning look, but Victoria gave a nearly imperceptible nod. As the first man released the housekeeper to follow Victoria, she whispered urgently to Mrs. Rodriguez in Spanish, a language Victoria had studied extensively in school. "Run for help when you can." The men followed Victoria to Garrett's study, growing increasingly agitated as they searched and found no strongbox or significant valuables. "You're lying," the first man growled, advancing on Victoria. "Where's the money?" "I don't know," she answered truthfully. "I've only been here a week." The second man grabbed her arm. A week, huh? What are you to Mitchell? His woman, Victoria tried to pull away. I'm a guest, nothing more, a guest, he repeated mockingly. Dressed like that, he gestured to her borrowed dress. Nah, you're something to him, which means you're valuable. A new plan seemed to form between them with unspoken understanding. The first man grinned unpleasantly. Change of plans. Mitchell's got something of ours, so we'll take something of his. You're coming with us, darling. Terror shot through Victoria as they began dragging her toward the door. She fought, kicking and struggling, but they were stronger. As they pulled her onto the porch, a gunshot cracked through the air, splintering the wood by the second man's head. Let her go. Garrett's voice was deadly quiet as he emerged from behind the barn, rifle raised. Behind him, Pedro and two other ranch hands appeared, similarly armed. The men froze, still holding Victoria between them. Mitchell, this doesn't concern you. That's where you're wrong, Jensen, Garrett replied, addressing the first man. You're on my property, threatening people under my protection. That very much concerns me. Jensen's grip on Victoria tightened. We just came for what you owe us. I owe you nothing. You lost fair and square at cards, then tried to cheat. You're lucky I didn't shoot you then. Garrett's aim never wavered. Now let her go. For a tense moment, Victoria thought the men might refuse, might use her as a shield to escape. Then, abruptly, Jensen shoved her forward, causing her to stumble down the porch steps. As she fell, another shot rang out, but not from Garrett's rifle. Victoria hit the ground hard, pain lancing through her palms as she broke her fall. Chaos erupted around her, more gunshots, shouting, the thunder of hooves. Someone grabbed her, and she lashed out in panic before recognizing Garrett's voice. It's me, Victoria, it's me. His arms encircled her, pulling her behind the water trough as bullets flew overhead. There are more of them, she gasped, registering that Jensen and his partner had been joined by at least 3 other men who had emerged from the scrubland. The Calloways, Garrett confirmed grimly. Jensen must have been working with them all along. From their sheltered position, Victoria could see ranch hands taking cover, returning fire. Mrs. Rodriguez had apparently reached the bunkhouse in time to alert the remaining men, who now formed a defensive perimeter around the main house. Stay here, Garrett ordered, preparing to rejoin the fight. Victoria grabbed his arm. Be careful. Their eyes met briefly, volume spoken in that single glance before Garrett moved away, keeping low as he circled toward the barn. Victoria remained crouched behind the trough, her mind working furiously. The Calloways and Jensen's crew had them outnumbered and they were pinned down. They needed help. The sheriff's office was miles away in town, but there was another option. Glancing toward the corral where several horses remained, Victoria made a decision. While all eyes were on the gunfight, she darted from her hiding place, using the chaos as cover to reach the nearest horse, a sturdy bay mare that nickered nervously as Victoria approached. With no time for a saddle, Victoria grabbed the horse's mane and pulled herself onto its back. She had ridden bareback as a girl during summers spent at her uncle's farm in Vermont. She prayed those skills hadn't abandoned her completely. Digging her heels into the mare's sides, she galloped away from the ranch, taking a different path than the main road to avoid being spotted by any outlaws positioned there. The ride was brutal, jarring, and precarious, but Victoria clung on, driven by determination and fear for those she'd left behind. Garrett might be angry that she'd fled, but when she returned with help. Terlingua appeared on the horizon faster than she'd expected, the town's few buildings a welcome sight. Victoria rode directly to the sheriff's office, sliding from the horse's back with legs so unsteady she nearly collapsed. "Sheriff," she called, stumbling through the door. "Sheriff Tinsley." The office was empty, but a deputy Victoria hadn't met before looked up from his desk, alarmed at her disheveled appearance. "Miss, what's happened?" "The Mitchell Ranch is under attack," Victoria explained breathlessly. "The Callaways and some men named Jensen, they need help," the deputy paled. "Sheriff's escorting the prisoner to the county seat. How many attackers?" "At least 5, maybe more." He nodded grimly, reaching for his gun belt. "I'll round up whoever I can. You stay here." "No," Victoria insisted. "I'm going back." "Miss, that's no place for I'm going," she repeated firmly. "Those people helped me when I had nothing. I won't abandon them now." The deputy looked like he might argue further, but seemed to recognize the determination in her eyes. "At least take a proper horse," he conceded. "And this." He handed her a small revolver. "You know how to use it." Victoria thought of her father, who had insisted she learn after her mother's death left them alone. "Yes." 20 minutes later, Victoria was riding back toward the ranch at the head of a hastily assembled posse: the deputy, the blacksmith, the general store owner, and 3 other men who had been in the saloon when the call for help went out. The revolver was tucked into the pocket of her dress, a reassuring weight against her hip. As they approached the ranch, the sound of gunfire reached them sporadic now, rather than the continuous exchange of before. The deputy signaled for them to split up, surrounding the property. Victoria stayed with him, her heart in her throat as they crested the final rise and the ranch came into view. The scene below was one of controlled chaos. 2 bodies lay motionless in the yard, neither of them Garrett, Victoria noted with relief. Several of the outbuildings showed damage from bullets, and a small fire had broken out in one corner of the barn, ranch hands working to extinguish it while staying under cover. "There." The deputy pointed to movement near the canyon trail, 3 riders fleeing at full gallop. "Some are escaping," Victoria realized. "We'll deal with the ones still here first," the deputy decided, raising his rifle to signal their presence to those below. The arrival of reinforcements turned the tide quickly. Caught between defenders at the ranch and the new arrivals, the remaining attackers soon surrendered Jensen and one of the Calloway brothers, Liam, their faces twisted with fury as they were disarmed and bound. Victoria dismounted near the house, searching desperately for Garrett among the men emerging from cover. She saw Pedro with a bloody arm being tended by Mrs. Rodriguez, several other ranch hands comparing notes on the attack, but no sign of Victoria. She turned at the sound of her name, relief washing over her as Garrett strode toward her, his shirt torn and bloodied at the shoulder but otherwise intact. Without thinking, Victoria ran to him, only stopping herself at the last moment from throwing her arms around him in full view of everyone. "You're hurt," she said instead, reaching tentatively toward the wound. "It's nothing. A graze." His eyes searched her face. "When I couldn't find you, I thought." He trailed off, the fear he'd felt evident in his expression. "I went for help," Victoria explained. "I couldn't just hide while you all fought." Garrett shook his head, a mix of admiration and exasperation crossing his features. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever heard of." "Perhaps a bit of both," Victoria admitted. "Did everyone else?" "We lost no one," Garrett assured her. "Emilio took a bullet in the leg and you've seen Pedro's arm, but they'll recover." His expression darkened. "We didn't fare as well as the attackers. 2 dead, one of Jensen's men and Rafe Calloway." Victoria absorbed this soberly. "I saw 3 riding away. Ben Calloway and 2 others we didn't recognize. They won't get far." The deputies already sent men to alert neighboring ranches to be on the lookout. As the immediate danger passed, the ranch began returning to a semblance of order. The prisoners were secured in the root cellar until they could be transported to town. The wounded were treated, and the damage was assessed significant but not catastrophic. Victoria insisted on cleaning and bandaging Garrett's wound herself. despite Mrs. Rodriguez's offer to do so. In the privacy of the kitchen, as she gently wiped blood from his shoulder, the emotions of the day caught up with her. "I was so afraid," she admitted quietly, her hands trembling slightly, "when I couldn't see you during the fighting." Garrett caught her wrist, stilling her movements. "I was afraid too," he confessed, his voice rough. "When I realized you weren't where I'd left you, I thought they'd taken you. I thought I'd failed to protect you." Victoria met his gaze. "You didn't fail. You gave me shelter when I had none, returned my father's watch when I thought it lost forever, and fought to defend me today. No one has ever done so much for me." "I'd do more," Garrett said simply, the words heavy with meaning. "If you'd let me." The air between them changed, charged with an awareness that had been building since that first moment on the general store's porch. Victoria became acutely conscious of their proximity, of Garrett's hand still around her wrist, of the steady rise and fall of his chest beneath his torn shirt. "Garrett," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. The kitchen door opened and they moved apart as the deputy entered. "Mitchell, we need to talk about transporting these prisoners." The moment broken, Victoria finished bandaging Garrett's shoulder in silence, her thoughts in turmoil. What was happening between them? She'd known him less than 2 weeks, yet she felt connected to him in ways she couldn't explain. Was it merely gratitude for his protection? Or something deeper, something that had taken root the moment he'd lifted her from that porch in town and given her his cleanest shirt to replace her torn and muddy dress? The following days were consumed with the aftermath of the attack. The prisoners were taken to the county seat. Statements were given. Repairs to the ranch began, and normal routines slowly resumed. Victoria threw herself into helping wherever she could, partly to repay Garrett's kindness, but also to avoid examining her growing feelings for him too closely. A week after the attack, a letter arrived from El Paso, a response to the note Victoria had sent explaining her delayed arrival. The school board expressed sympathy for her ordeal, but regretted to inform her that the position had been filled 3 days after she failed to arrive as scheduled. Victoria read the letter on the porch, a strange sense of relief mingling with uncertainty about her future. She had no position, no home of her own, and dwindling options. Yet the prospect of leaving Terlingua, of leaving Garrett, filled her with a sadness she hadn't anticipated. Bad news. Garrett's voice startled her from her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, watching her with those perceptive green eyes. Victoria held up the letter. "The teaching position in El Paso is gone. They hired someone else." Garrett nodded, joining her on the porch. "I'm sorry to hear that. Though I can't say I'm entirely disappointed." "Why is that?" Victoria asked, her pulse quickening. "Because it means you might consider staying." He leaned against the railing, facing her. "Terlingua needs a teacher, Victoria. The children here have no school, no education beyond what their parents can provide." Victoria blinked in surprise. "There's no school at all?" "None. The mining company promised to build 1 year ago, but it never materialized. The children of ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, they're all growing up without the learning they deserve." Hope sparked within her. "Are there enough families to support a school?" "More than you'd think. This area is growing, and if there was a proper teacher—" Garrett hesitated before continuing. "I've been thinking about this since you first mentioned your profession. I own a small building in town that was once a meeting hall. It would need work, but it could be converted into a schoolhouse, and there's a cottage behind it that would serve as a teacher's residence." Victoria stared at him, possibilities unfolding before her. "You've thought about this a great deal." "I have." His expression grew earnest. "This community needs someone like you, Victoria. Someone educated, someone who cares about more than just surviving out here. Someone who can help shape the future of this place." "And is that all you want?" Victoria asked softly. For me to teach the children of Terlingua, Garrett's gaze intensified. No, he admitted. That's not all I want. He crossed the space between them, taking her hands in his. I want you to stay because I can't imagine this place without you now. Because in the short time you've been here, you've brought something to my life I didn't know was missing. He squeezed her hands gently. I'm not a man who believes in fate, Victoria, but finding you that day, torn dress and all, it feels like more than chance. Victoria's heart soared at his words, but caution tempered her response. We barely know each other. I know enough, Garrett countered. I know you're brave enough to ride for help when others would hide. I know you're kind enough to comfort Mrs. Rodriguez when she was frightened, even though you were scared yourself. I know you're determined enough to build a new life thousands of miles from everything familiar. His voice softened. And I know that when I thought I might lose you during the attack, it felt like losing a part of myself. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. I felt the same way, she confessed, when I couldn't find you after the shooting stopped. Garrett released her hands only to cup her face gently. Then stay. Not just as Terlingua's teacher, but for me. Give us time to discover everything we don't yet know about each other. Yes, Victoria whispered, her decision made with a certainty that surprised her. Yes, I'll stay. His smile was brilliant, transforming his features in that rare way she'd come to treasure. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Garrett leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a first kiss that held both tenderness and promise, sealing their decision with unspoken emotion. When they parted, Victoria felt as though her life had realigned, the scattered pieces falling into a pattern she hadn't anticipated but now couldn't imagine changing. Boston, her father's death, the stagecoach robbery, all had led her here, to this moment, to this man. There's something else, Garrett said, his tone turning serious. If you're to be Terlingua's teacher, there's a matter of propriety to consider. A single woman living alone. Victoria nodded, understanding. Western communities could be traditional in their expectations. Perhaps Mrs. Rodriguez could chaperone until I'm established. Or, Garrett suggested, a hint of nervousness belying his confident demeanor, you could consider another arrangement entirely. Victoria's breath caught as she realized what he was proposing. Garrett, are you asking? Not yet, he interrupted gently. It's too soon for that, even I know that much. But I am asking if you'll consider me when the time is right, when we've had time to be sure. Relief and affection flooded through Victoria. This was the man she was falling in love with, forthright yet thoughtful, traditional yet willing to give her the space she needed. I will consider it, she promised. And I suspect my answer, when the time comes, won't surprise either of us. Garrett's expression brightened with hope. In the meantime, I'll start repairs on the schoolhouse. How soon do you think you could begin teaching? With proper notice to families, perhaps by month's end, Victoria suggested, her mind already filling with plans for curricula and supplies. Though I'll need books, slates. Leave that to me, Garrett assured her. Consider it my contribution to Terlingua's future. As the sun set over the ranch, casting long shadows across the yard, Victoria allowed herself to fully embrace the path she had chosen, not the one she had planned months ago in Boston, but one that had revealed itself through hardship and chance, and the kindness of a stranger who was rapidly becoming the most important person in her life. Summer gave way to fall, and Victoria threw herself into establishing Terlingua's first school. The former meeting hall was transformed under Garrett's direction, new windows installed, walls whitewashed, desks and benches constructed by the local carpenter. The cottage behind it was similarly renovated, providing Victoria with a small but comfortable home of her own, though she found herself spending more evenings at the ranch than at her new residence. News of the school spread quickly throughout the county, drawing families who had previously hesitated to settle in the area due to lack of educational opportunities. By opening day, Victoria had 27 students ranging in age from 6 to 16, their faces eager and curious as they filed into the schoolhouse for the first time. Garrett attended the opening ceremony, standing proudly at the back of the room as Victoria welcomed the children and their parents. His support never wavered, from securing books and supplies to defending the curriculum, when some parents questioned the inclusion of poetry and art alongside practical subjects. Education isn't just about learning to cipher and write your name, Victoria overheard him telling a skeptical father one evening at the general store. It's about opening minds to possibilities. Miss Fairfield understands that better than anyone. Their courtship progressed with deliberate care, mindful of the community's watchful eyes. They rode together on Sundays, picnicked by the creek that ran through Garrett's property, and shared quiet dinners at the ranch with Mrs. Rodriguez, providing both excellent meals and appropriate chaperonage. Victoria came to know the complexities of Garrett's character, his occasional broodiness stemming from wartime experiences he rarely discussed, his unexpected humor that emerged when he was truly comfortable, his unwavering sense of justice that had made him respected throughout the county. In turn, Garrett discovered the strength beneath Victoria's refined exterior, her passionate commitment to her students, and the occasional stubbornness that both frustrated and delighted him. Their disagreements were few but spirited, often ending in compromises that left them both satisfied and more deeply connected. As Christmas approached, Victoria organized the school's first holiday pageant, an event that drew nearly everyone in Terlingua, despite a rare dusting of snow that made travel difficult. The schoolhouse was decorated with pine boughs and handmade ornaments. The children performed songs and recitations they had practiced for weeks, and a sense of community pride filled the room. Garrett watched from his customary place at the back, his expression softening whenever Victoria glanced his way. After the final carol, as parents collected their children and neighbors exchanged seasonal greetings, he made his way to her side. "You've transformed this place," he said quietly, gesturing to encompass both the schoolhouse and the town beyond its walls. "In just a few months, you've given Terlingua something it never had before." Victoria smiled, warmed by his praise. "I couldn't have done it without you. I merely provided the building. The rest has been all you." Garrett took her hand, an increasingly common gesture that still sent a thrill through her. "Would you join me for dinner at the ranch tonight? Mrs. Rodriguez has prepared something special." Victoria agreed readily, curious about the hint of anticipation in his voice. After bidding farewell to the last of her students and securing the schoolhouse, she rode with Garrett through the crisp evening air, the stars particularly brilliant in the winter sky. The ranch house was warm and inviting, decorated for the season with the same pine boughs that adorned the school. Mrs. Rodriguez greeted them with unusual formality, ushering them to a table set with the fine china Garrett rarely used. Candles provided most of the illumination, their golden light creating an atmosphere of intimacy. As they finished the dessert, a traditional Mexican custard Mrs. Rodriguez had prepared to perfection, Garrett reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in silver paper. "An early Christmas gift," he explained, sliding it across the table to Victoria. With curious fingers, she unwrapped the parcel to reveal a small velvet box. Her heart began to race as she opened it, revealing a ring not ostentatious, but beautifully crafted, with a modest diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. "It was my mother's," Garrett said softly. My father gave it to her when they decided to leave Virginia and make their life in Texas. He told her it represented their past, present, and future, the diamond for the life they'd shared, the sapphires for the blue skies of Texas that would witness their future together. Victoria looked up from the ring to find Garrett watching her intently, his expression a mixture of hope and vulnerability she'd rarely seen him display. "Victoria Fairfield," he continued, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it, "these past months have been the happiest of my life. What began with a torn dress and a borrowed shirt has become something I never expected to find out here." He reached across the table to take her hands. "I love you. I love your courage, your kindness, your determination. I love the way you've embraced this community and the future we could build here together." He drew a deep breath. "Will you marry me?" Though she had anticipated this moment might come, the reality of it, the sincerity in Garrett's eyes, the weight of the decision before her momentarily overwhelmed Victoria. Her journey west had been about independence, about forging a path of her own choosing after years of duty and loss. Now she was being offered a different kind of path, one shared with a partner who respected her strength and supported her dreams. "Yes," Victoria answered, her voice clear and certain. "Yes, I will marry you, Garrett Mitchell." The joy that transformed his features was answer enough to any lingering doubts she might have harbored. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though meant for her all along, Victoria knew she had found not just a home in this rugged land, but a love that would weather whatever challenges the frontier might bring. Their wedding took place the following spring, when wildflowers carpeted the hills surrounding Terlingua, and the harsh winter winds had given way to gentler breezes. The entire community turned out for the occasion, the ceremony held in the schoolhouse Victoria had come to love, with Sheriff Tinsley fully recovered from his drinking spell, and grateful for the couple's role in capturing the Cowboy gang officiating. Victoria wore a gown of ivory silk ordered from San Antonio, with Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter's veil crowning her dark hair. Garrett, unaccustomed to formal attire, nevertheless cut a handsome figure in a new black suit, his customary expression of calm self-possession softened by the undisguised adoration in his eyes as Victoria walked toward him on the arm of Dr. Wells, the elderly physician who had agreed to give her away. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises to honor and cherish each other through whatever life might bring. When Garrett leaned down to seal their union with a kiss, the cheers from the assembled guests nearly drowned out the spring birds singing outside the open windows. The celebration continued well into the night, with tables set up in the schoolyard, lanterns strung between trees, and music provided by local musicians. Victoria danced not only with her new husband but with many of the fathers of her students, with the ranch hands who had come to respect her as their boss's wife-to-be, and even with young Pedro, whose wounded arm had healed well enough for him to twirl her carefully around the makeshift dance floor. As midnight approached, Garrett found her sitting with Mrs. Rodriguez, watching the continued festivities with contented exhaustion. "Ready to leave, Mrs. Mitchell?" he asked, the name still new enough to bring a blush to Victoria's cheeks. They had decided she would continue teaching, an unusual arrangement in these parts, but one the community had come to accept as fitting for the woman who had brought education to their children. She would divide her time between the schoolhouse and the ranch, maintaining her independence while building their life together. "Yes," she answered, rising to embrace Mrs. Rodriguez. "Thank you for everything." The older woman's eyes glistened with tears as she patted Victoria's cheek. "Be happy, Majida. You have found a good man, and he has found his match in you." Amid a shower of rice and well wishes, They departed in Garrett's wagon, heading not for the ranch but for a small cabin he owned by the river, a private retreat where they would spend their wedding night and the following week before returning to their regular responsibilities. The cabin was rustic but comfortable, lit by the warm glow of a fire Garrett had arranged to have prepared earlier that day. As he carried her across the threshold, insisting on observing this tradition, despite Victoria's laughing protests that she was perfectly capable of walking, the reality of their new status settled over them both. "Welcome home, Victoria Mitchell," Garrett said softly, setting her gently on her feet. Victoria smiled up at him, reaching to loosen his tie. "It has a nice sound to it." "It does," he agreed, capturing her hand to press a kiss to her palm. "Almost as nice as the sound of your voice that first day, asking for help when you could barely stand. You remember that?" "I remember everything about that day," Garrett admitted. "The way the sun was setting behind you, how despite your torn dress and exhaustion, you held yourself with such dignity. How even then, something told me my life had just changed forever." Victoria's heart swelled with emotion. "My father used to say that life's most important moments often arrive disguised as ordinary days. I think he was right." As Garrett drew her into his arms, Victoria reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment, from the sheltered academic halls of Boston to the wild beauty of West Texas, from the terror of the stagecoach robbery to the safety she'd found with this man. Her torn and muddy dress had been replaced first by his cleanest shirt, then by the beautiful gown she now wore, but the transformation went far deeper than clothing. She had arrived in Terlingua broken in many ways, grieving, alone, stripped of possessions and plans. Now she stood whole again, stronger for having been broken, with a husband who cherished her, a community that respected her, and a purpose that fulfilled her. "I love you," she whispered against Garrett's lips as he lowered his head to kiss her. "More than I ever thought possible." His answer was in the tenderness of his touch, in the way he held her as though she were both precious and strong, in the love that had grown between them from the most unlikely of beginnings. Years passed, the rhythms of ranch life and school terms marking the passage of time. Victoria continued teaching, even after the birth of their first child, a son they named Joseph, after her father. The school grew as Terlingua prospered, eventually requiring an assistant teacher whom Victoria trained herself. Their family expanded with the addition of a daughter, Eleanor, whose spirit and determination reminded everyone of her mother. The ranch flourished under Garrett's careful management, becoming one of the most respected operations in the county. The couple's reputation for fairness and generosity made them central figures in the community, their home a gathering place for neighbors and travelers alike. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Garrett surprised Victoria with a gift, a framed square of fabric, carefully preserved behind glass. "Is that," Victoria began, recognizing the faded blue material, "a piece of the dress you were wearing when I found you," Garrett confirmed. "Mrs. Rodriguez saved it. Said someday we might want to remember how it all began." Victoria traced the frame with gentle fingers, remembering the desperation of that day, the relief of being lifted into strong arms, the strange comfort of a stranger's shirt against her skin. "From this," she mused, gesturing to the framed fabric, "to everything we have now. Who could have imagined it?" Garrett's smile was tender as he drew her close. "I think I began to imagine it the moment I saw you. I just didn't know yet how wonderful the reality would be." As the setting sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had illuminated their first meeting, Victoria leaned into her husband's embrace, grateful for torn dresses, clean shirts, and the unexpected paths that lead to home.